December 17th, 2013. This is Ison before perihelion. This also a microscopic image of space dust. It's a crystalline substance with a lot of chemicals. What I want to do is analyze the information we've been given, and no one knows what will happen, but we're going to do that. Now, it says you can read this. Again, it's dumping, they were saying here, ejecting 122,000 tons of matter per minute from its tail. Meteor expert Paul Weingart says for several days starting around January 12th. Now that matches my timeline of the 7 days of passage from the 12th to the 19th. Here's an image of Ison back when it got stripped from the X-flare on November 19th. You've got now at the front, you have went from 250,000 kilometers to 60,000 kilometers on the outer comma. You come back and you can see the V of the debris that was swept back. And in the left side of this image, you can see the outer comma that was stripped back. Remember, it was very large. Now, what was not stripped back immediately here was the ion tail at the top. But that's a debris trail coming out of the bottom left. We change colors here, go into that more that natural green. But let's take a look at it. Now, the width here, you're looking probably about 70,000 kilometers with everything. If it hadn't not been for that X-flare, this would have been one of the most amazing sights you had ever seen on LASCO C3 coming in at 5 times this size. But all of this was stripped back and reserved. Now, we're talking about CN gas. Look at the different images here. Again, there's that large outer cloud that was stripped back. Here's the image that I caught that on H1 that day. In the front is the comet, then the big cloud. You can see the different debris in that tail. The whole thing was stripped back, and that's what we're looking at. The green images is actually about 2 images past the one on HI1, where everything is pushed back somewhat further. Looking at it at different temperatures, but you can see we're talking about comet dust, space dust. Now we got some debris in this tail. If not, you would not have fireballs and meteor showers, guys. But this is about the dust and the information that they've given us. I'm just going through different temperatures and different filters here and looking at what we're dealing with. Now, guys, remember, this is not what we're going through. This is what would be following Ison in its perihelion. In the back here, Ison crossed Earth's orbit on Halloween, October 31st. This is 19 days later, so we're back. What we're going through is not this. 5 times this width, okay? Now, they're saying it's an unusual meteor storm because it's going to, the Earth is going to pull it in. It's not going to come in fast enough to burn up in the atmosphere. These are their words, that it's going to slowly drift to the surface of the Earth. It'll be in the clouds. It will drift all the way into the water and into the soil. And we're dealing with cyanide. That's one of the chemicals that causes these comets to glow green. So now you'd say, well, will that burn up coming into the atmosphere? Well, they said it's not going to do that. Remember, it's coming in slow. But it has some of these chemicals don't burn up to nearly 5,000 degrees anyway. Now here again, Paul has calculated that the dust from Comet Ison could create an unusual meteor shower on Earth. For several days around January 12, 2014, Earth will pass through a stream of fine-grained debris from Ison. Because the particles are so small, Earth's upper atmosphere will rapidly slow them to a stop. Instead of burning up in a flash of light, they will drift gently down to Earth. The dust could linger in our upper atmosphere for years. The interstellar dust surrounding Earth, it contains prions. Remember the call-in from Paul Begley's show yesterday? That's one of the things called mad cow disease. Now, can these metals attach themselves to the space dust and drift down? So we got comet dust, space dust, and both contain heavy metals. What are the charges of the metal? Guys, you can pause any of this, but they talk about finding out through using infrared spectra of silicate emissions to determine these chemical compounds. Now, This this came out in November of this year, guys, just a few weeks ago. Researching up in Lancashire. It says there's a circumsolar dust ring with a diameter of 220 million kilometers, which encircles the sun and closely follows the orbit of planet Venus. The new discovery, reported in the Journal of Science, is saying that it's going to help scientists understand more about a similar resonant ring of dust that exists around the Earth's orbit, as well as investigate in more detail how this dust moves in space. Now, they're discovering it by using stereo A and B images. But, guys, 220 kilometers is 136 million miles. So, in 1 AU, 92 million miles is the distance from the Earth to the Sun. Also, they contain what's called black bodies. Notice here, this is from that spectrograph from Hale-Bopp here. And a black body is a unique element. It will actually absorb radiation, and they say that if you put it in a room, it will absorb all of the heat, and the radiation in there actually become hotter while the room freezes. That's unusual. But this CN2 that they're saying we know it's in Ison because of the green glow. It's not going to burn up in the atmosphere. Okay. Now, anyway, if you look at the bottom of the page, it would take 4,525 degrees Celsius to burn it anyway, and that's the outer corona of the sun at 5,000, guys. But here's what we're talking about, that it can interrupt mitochondrial electron transfer chain, cyanogen gas. They used it in the gas chambers. They used it in poison. They used it in insecticides. Hitler used it in the death camps. Now, what would they use for population control? Notice that ferrocyanide at the top. They use it as an anti-caking agent. They say, but if you use just enough of it, just a little, it won't hurt you. But now they've got it in all of these items. You see this? Table salt, milk and cream powders, vending machine, icing, baking powder, cake mixes, instant soup powder, drinking chocolate. Guys, vending machine, coffee, cocoa, soap powder, and soap powders. They have enough in this that and look at the bottom of this, mitochondria DNA again is mentioned. Remember the video I did called the 1200 years about the culling? You might want to watch it if you hadn't. But again, this talks about cell biology, the nucleus, all of that. And again, talking about it has been implicated in several human disease that's called mitochondria, including cardiac dysfunction, aging, and the word means in Greek thread, like break the thread that binds. But guys, think about what we're talking about. Now, because of the heavy metals involved in this, guys, both the comet and space dust, we've got to consider electromagnetism. This is what I'm thinking. The charge of the sun and the charge of the metals in the space dust versus the charge in the comet dust. Comets are attracted to the sun. They're opposite, like magnets with opposite sides attract. But once they're discharged by that perihelion, that charge is stripped away and the comet is repelled, like trying to touch two magnets together on the same pole. The floating dust must be positive that we're talking about. If not, the sun would attract it so fast that it would probably cause a huge explosion. But it's creating that giant bubble that they talked about on Paul Begley's show yesterday, the caller, that talked about the space dust, that talked about the heavy metals in the sample that had the prions in it. Now, but Ison's dust is negative because the part we're going through never reached perihelion, right? It's still negative. So will the metals that are in Ison's dust cling to the metals that are in the space dust because they're opposite polarity, pulling the prions to Earth with the CN2 gas? Now look at this image of LASCO C2. Guys, you can see this dust. It's gotten like this in the last few weeks, worse than it has been. Even though these cameras were damaged by X flares a few years ago, you can see this dust as these flares come out. And the sun has been very active. Look at this. 16th. Again, today we've had another flares beginning. But guys, I want to talk about the Denver airport, some symbology here. In the top, you've got, some people call it space alien. It looks like maybe a Russian or something like that. Notice its gas mask. Notice coming through the air is like a comet. It's showing the swing of the sword that kills the dove. Now, also in the airport, it looks like a sword striking the stone that's saying the New World Airport. But that's what some people say. I say it's the comet tail striking, and it strikes right in the middle of 7 marks, right at 3.5. Are you listening? In other words, the Earth is going to go through what they're symbolizing here. Very well could be the Earth going through this debris trail of this comet. Count the marks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and right in the middle is where that's at. It's a heads up, guys. Be safe.